Hello there, Jeff
Hey, mate.
Goodman with Arm Dynamics. I'm here with Nick Hughes, my very good friend of Warriors Krav Maga, and welcome back to the channel. It has been a hot minute for Arm Dynamics since the last time I posted a video. You can check out previous videos that I've been doing for the past almost decade at practicallytactical.com, but now breathing new life into this YouTube channel, and I thought what better guest to have on this show, on this channel, than Nick Hughes, who I'm so excited. Actually, I must say, before he even introduces himself, and also I like to talk, but it's my channel, so I can do that, is we literally have spent the past hour prior to recording just talking. So it's so wonderful to have you on the show, Nick. Give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are and all that good stuff, and then I'll say kind of where we met and all that.
Okay. I was born at a very early age. I started my martial arts career before Bruce Lee was a thing. So that shows you how old I am. At the school judo club. And the judo club, we did judo for an hour and then we did 30 minutes of jujitsu. And I loved, that's traditional Japanese stuff, not BJJ. And I loved the jujitsu. I loved the self-defense aspect even then, way before the sport. I got into a karate system out there that was an eclectic style based heavily on Goju, run by a guy that tied up the Australian security industry. So we bodyguarded all the major rock and roll stars. We did crowd control. Pretty much if you went into a club in Australia with bouncers, it was our guys were on the door. He had 500 schools around the country, and it was an unwritten rule that if you wanted to get your black belt, you went and did some door work. And I ended up inadvertently, lucky or unlucky, depends on your viewpoint. I ended up working in one of the roughest clubs in town. And it was that because it was a strip club. So it didn't have any female clientele. It was all guys, and the only strip club in town. So if a guy at the car dealership or the shipyard or a bricklaying crew was going to get married, of course, the ubiquitous stag party, bring his buddies along, and they'd all go to the only strip club in town. So we would have anything anywhere from I think the biggest crowd we had was 800 guys from the Air Force Base coming in one night. And we'd have these massive groups of guys, and they have a propensity for fighting in Australia, growing up playing rugby, and a fight is part of a good night out. The alcohol content is high, so these guys would start causing trouble around 11 o'clock at night. We'd go down and say, you have to leave. They'd look at us and go, there's 4 of you, 3 during the week, 4 on the weekends. 4 of you and 40 of us, what are you going to do about it? And it would be on. So I got a lot of experience fighting multiples. I wanted to move from the bouncing to the next level up. I was fascinated with the whole bodyguarding thing that my instructors were doing. They were looking after the Stones, David Bowie, ABBA, Fleetwood Mac. They're all clients. One of my very good friends, Noel Rush, is still looking after Billy Joel to this day. So these guys were doing that. I wanted to get into that and even take that a step beyond and go diplomatic protection. Australia back then had no diplomatic protection. We had no terrorism. So our prime minister was protected by a retired policeman with a 6-shot revolver, and that was it. And everyone told me, if you want to do that sort of stuff, you're going to have to go overseas. So I ended up in Europe trying to get into diplomatic protection, found out from the agencies run by ex-SAS guys that you have to have military experience. So I jumped into the French Foreign Legion for 5 years. That advice came from a guy working on one of the teams. He said, that would be a good idea because by learning at least one other language, you make yourself much more valuable working throughout Europe. And French as a language will take you to a lot of places. And so I did that for 5 years, got out, met Dennis Martin in England running a bodyguard course with Lofty Wiseman of 22 SAS fame, did their training. Dennis lined me up with work before I even got out of the Legion. I worked with him on security for Boeing at the Paris Air Show. And when I was finishing my 5-year contract with the Legion, Dennis had called and said, when you get out, call me. We have a job starting looking after one of the Saudi royals in London. So I had my first gig lined up the 2 days after I left the Legion. I did that all around the world, lived and worked in 21 countries. I ended up in the States, got married. That lasted 10 years. And then I got back into teaching self-defense. I was teaching karate as a side hustle for a bunch of cops. And then 9/11 happened and I got inundated with calls. We don't want to go the traditional martial arts route because it takes too long. Have you got something that's sort of hard hitting and quick? And I looked at the antecedents in the Legion and I said, well, that's basically military unarmed combat, isn't it? You got 4 to 40 hours, depending on the unit, to train someone up into something that's going to work under pressure if you end up without a weapon. And I called it FIST, Fight Survival Training. I was going to use Legion, but no one knows what the Legion was. And most of the Americans remember Abbott and Costello running around with the hankies hanging out the back of their hats. Mm. And so I called it FIST and started teaching that. That led me into Krav Maga, which is where I find myself to this day.
Yeah, there's already questions that I have to follow up. Also, I might note that Nick is one of these guys that if you can get to around him, you are a masterful storyteller. And it's that's always been a I find myself always attracted to people that are characters, and I guess I've been told that I'm one as well. But he's doing a micro of his background. And having trained with Nick many times over the past years, and this is what the interesting thing I said I was going to show you. Check it out. This is circa 2005, and that's with the fight survival training. So Jeffrey Bluevman has participated in an improvised weapons workshop. And yeah, so I saved all my certs. It's one of the only things I keep track of, but that's how long we've known each. Wow, holy shit! Is that almost 20 years?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Whoa, math is not my strong suit, but we're working on it, right? Yeah. So I was introduced to Nick back in 2005, as you saw. A buddy of mine, Mark, we would go kind of all over the Eastern Seaboard training with Nick from like Philadelphia, which we are, like right outside Philly, to like North Carolina. We go down there and everywhere kind of in between.
We did Maryland.
Yeah.
Columbia, Maryland.
Yeah. Was that like by the military base?
No, we did the Krav Maga school in Columbia, Maryland. You guys came down there. You and Mark came to that one.
There you go. There was that. And I found myself really, really attracted to and fascinated by kind of the whole perspective that you have, Nick, which is, and back then it was the FIST, the fight survival training, which I may be bringing back to life because I've been approached to teach some combative stuff. And I'm like, well, in order for me to teach combatives, I'm going to be drawing very heavily from the fight survival training, from Craig Douglas's work with ECQC and Edge Weapons Overview, and then everything kind of in between from jiu-jitsu and then also traditional martial arts, which I have a question about. But I love this the way that I viewed fight survival training and really all of your training is that it's inclusive of it's combatives, but also a little bit more evolved, but also kind of simplified still as the combatives is. And I think that one of the things, and you could maybe touch on this, is we have a tendency, especially American culture, where we don't really understand where combatives came from, in that it's a very short duration of training, military style thing that needs to work on the battlefield. When rifle goes down, go to your pistol goes down, go to your knife goes down, go to your helmet, I think was the thing that you used to say. But we need to be able to fight essentially on feet, pugilism, stand up, in the tie up with grappling, and then to the ground grappling, and then everything in, improvised weapons like you saw with that sheet, that cert. But tell us a little bit about what is combatives, and I guess also, what is Warriors Krav Maga that you're currently doing? What's your perspective on that stuff?
Okay. Great question. I had a fascination with the military growing up in Australia as a kid. And I had, anything World War II didn't matter. Any of those movies, Guns of Navarone, The Longest Day, Bridge Too Far, I would watch those things. And my favorites were always the ones that had the unarmed combat in the Devil's Brigade, with the scene with the big American with the Canadian guy beats him up in the cafeteria. And they actually, a lot of people don't know this, the name they gave the unarmed combat instructor was the name of the real unarmed combat instructor for the legitimate Devil's Brigade in World War II.
Oh.
Yeah, they really gave that guy his name. They featured him in the film. I had a fascination with that, with all the unarmed combat training scenes, didn't matter what the movie was. And I was finding manuals back then. I had the little U.S. Marine Corps unarmed combat manual, the FMJC, whatever. I found that
Got it right over there.
Yep. Yeah, I found it in a bookstore in Australia. I worked on the door with two ex-Australian SAS guys, and we would swap notes. So I had this fascination with the military unarmed combat then, and then kind of shelved it. When I got into the Legion, we did some, and it was dire. It was really, really, really bad. I don't know where they got it from, but it was horrible. And when they found out my background, I started tweaking some of the stuff, showing them what was better. And a lot of times they just hand the unarmed combat section of the class over to me. And then it was funny. I bumped into Dennis, as I said, doing the bodyguard training with him. And then he called me. They were going to a conference in Orlando run by it was a massive conference. I forget who put it on, but there were ex-CIA guys there and SF, Dev, Grew, all sorts of people doing, it was like a buffet of training. You could pick who you wanted to train with. And Dennis and I shared a hotel room, and he was talking about, he discovered this book, Kill or Be Killed. And he said, man, it's fascinating. He said, it was World War II, but I'm looking at it with Terry O'Neill, who's, for those that don't know, an amazing martial artist in England. He used to put out Fighting Arts International magazine. And Dennis and he were sitting down at the coffee shop looking at it, almost like a cartoon, like this will be funny, look at this shit. And they're looking at it going, well, hang on a minute, this all works, right? Knees to the balls, palm heels, eye gouging. They said, this is great. And then Dennis sort of took this spin. Why am I doing traditional martial arts with thousands and thousands and thousands of techniques when I could focus on this little core element of stuff? And that was sort of the first foray into this. And then I think what happens is, you know, when an idea gets out into the universe, other people pick it up, because now over here in the States, we had Kelly McCann, and I forget his buddy, had started the whole combatives thing. In fact, tribute where it's due, Kelly came up with the name combatives. A lot of people have run with it and stolen it and used it, but it was, as far as I can see, it was Kelly came up with that name. And
on the civilian training.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It was called hand-to-hand combat or unarmed combat in the military. All right.
Kelly, so he legitimately came up with the term
combatives. Yeah. And so what you've got, these guys, very similar to what happened in World War II, right? Two different instructors running the same sort of stuff. And you've got Kelly McCann over here in the States. You have Dennis in England, and they're both following that same path. And then Dennis and I were talking about it, and I said, man, I've got all those books. I used to practice that stuff, and that's what I've been teaching in the Legion. So we were swapping notes. And for the longest time, I got caught up in the whole combatives things again. And Paladin filmed that thing, and Hockheim did some stuff with me on it. But then this is where I take a different path, and which is good. I mean, I don't get into this, we all have to agree on everything bullshit. Stephen Covey is attributed with saying, and I think it's a brilliant saying, if two people agree on everything, right, one of them's not necessary. And I think that's great. And you've heard my analogy when I go to teach a seminar, and I'll get sidetracked here, so remind me to come back to why I went off into Warriors Crav instead of sticking with this. I have an analogy when I teach that I like a lot. If we got 20 of the most famous artists in the world, now deceased, right? So talking Klee, Pollock, Picasso, Van Gogh, Da Vinci. We got all these guys and we stuck them round a bowl of fruit and had them paint pictures. All of those pictures would be masterpieces, and all of those pictures would be worth millions. But where we get into in martial arts is someone standing behind Picasso, looking at it from Picasso's viewpoint, says Picasso's painting is correct and all the others are wrong, right? Because he's looking at it from the same point of view that Picasso is. But Picasso can't see the grapes because they're on the other side of the pineapple, right? And then you got the guy standing behind Da Vinci who's painted the grapes, and he's going, no, you're wrong. Your guy doesn't even have grapes in it, right? Because from his viewpoint, he can't see what that guy can see. And we lose sight of that in the martial arts, and we get this viewpoint where we think, no, I'm correct and you're wrong, right? And you got to understand it's just a different viewpoint. So the guy doing sport karate who gets denigrated by the combatives guys, right? And then you get the Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys who denigrate everybody else. They're all just looking at the same fucking thing. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Fuck yeah. They're all looking at the same bowl of fruit. They're just looking at it from, and I've had the good fortune of looking at that bowl of fruit from every viewpoint. Did sport, box professionally, fought in judo competitions and kickboxing tournaments all over the world, and I've also worked on nightclub doors all over the world. So I have the self-defense perspective, the Japanese martial art, the eclectic martial arts, the military versions. I've looked at all the viewpoints, and you just get these myopic fuckers that sit there and go, no, this is the way, and that's not true. So anyway, coming back to combatives, my problem with it is this, and this is what I started to realize. And I think a lot of people don't understand this. The combatives we attribute to the Sykes-Fairbairn crowd and instructors of that ilk, right? They were the big names. They had a very specific mission in World War II. You had to train a civilian populace in very short time frame. And the guys that got the most of the unarmed combat training were going to be parachuted behind enemy lines to organize the resistance in Europe, right, to take on the Germans. And so who did they bring in? They brought in two traditional martial artists, right? Fairbairn was not, there's only 5 techniques, right? He was out in Shanghai running around out there, and they had, one of them I think was jiu-jitsu and one was kung fu, if I remember, right? But they trained in traditional martial arts back before anyone knew what those things were. And then they brought them in and they said to these guys, look, we've got these civilians. We're going to parachute them behind enemy lines. They're going to be dressed as civilians with fake papers. Right? They may get stopped at a checkpoint. We got to give them some way, right, to hit. They're not going to have weapons on them that they can draw. We got to give them a way to smack this guy and run for it. Okay, what can you teach us? So things like jumping, spinning back kicks and throws and all that stuff are out the window. You put them in this filter. What can I teach in 30 minutes or less to the least coordinated person in the group that fucking works, right? And you end up, if you look at all military unarmed combat, you end up with the same shit. Palm, heels, elbows, knees, headbutts, biting, eye gouged. Right? Great. That was it for a very specific mission. And it was taught. So all of the combatives guys jumped on that and said, this shit's great. We should be doing that, blah, blah, blah. But here is where I think they missed the ball. And I'm not trying not to tread on toes. It's just literally, like I said, I don't want to agree with everybody else. What would Sykes and Fairbairn be doing today? If they were still around? Would they be teaching exactly the same shit they were teaching in World War II? I would submit no. If we look at all fighting arts, look at how they evolve. Go and look at a picture of people like Figs and Sutton, the old boxers back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, I think they were. The stance with the back of the fist towards the guy, and the circling fist, and leaning all the weight on the back foot. It almost looks like a back stance in karate, right? And then you compare that to Tyson's peekaboo, leaning very aggressively forward on the front foot, right? Boxing has changed. Look at Brazilian jiu-jitsu, what it was in the short time when it came to this country in UFC and what it looks like now. Right? It's evolved. I know you're a student of it, so you know, right? And
mine never evolved, but it's an old school BJJ thing. But yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I know the son, the older one was lamenting we've gone too far down the sport road, and he said we're making up shit to counter the guy at the tournament that I went last. I have to come up with a new technique. So you're creating this stuff, and is it functional? No, for self-defense you don't need it.
But I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So I look at the Sykes-Fairbairn thing. I'm going, what would they be doing now, right? How would their art have evolved? Would they have gone off into Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Would they be incorporating Filipino stuff? What would they be doing, right? I don't know. I can tell you this. They wouldn't be doing the same shit they were doing back in 1942, all right? It would have evolved. What would have evolved to, we don't know. Next thing, right? They were teaching that program because of the parameters of the program. We can only give you these. I think the commando training thing in Scotland was 3 months. They were put through that program. They had to learn Morse code, parachuting, shooting guns, explosives, demolition,
Small
covert
unit
operation,
tactics,
all that shit in 3
Yeah.
short months, right? And unarmed combat is a tiny little piece of that, 4 to 14 hours of training. So that was the parameters they were given. What if you said to them, hey, we've got 3 years to train these guys? Would they only be doing palm, heels, elbows, knees, headbutts, and sticking the finger in the fucking eye? Right? I would submit no. They would have gone back to more of their traditional martial. Well, if I've got time, shit, let me show you this really cool roundhouse kick, right? And I just looked at that going, why are we under this time constraint with combatives? I don't have clients walking in my door going, hey, I'm going to go behind enemy lines in Ukraine next week, and I need you to show me something, because then I would show the combative stuff. Right. But I've got regular civilians living in America, and I'm like, are you going to get a home invasion next week, tomorrow, whatever? So we start with the very functional shit in my first level, but then I go, hey, hang around and I'll show you some more stuff, and we build on those layers. And that's why I got out of combatives per se and went more, called it crap, it's just labeling. Right? Because I wanted to differentiate between those two things. If I only had a couple of weeks to show someone something, right? And by the way, that's a great training drill I give my instructors. When I'm training instructors, one of the questions is, you get a friend who called you, my car just broke down in the shittiest part of town, right? Tell me something over the phone that's going to help me in this situation, right? And now you've got an hour. And now you've got 24 hours. Now you've got a week. Now you've got a month. Now you've got 3 months, and you watch what changes and what evolves, right? And I just look at us civilians now. We have a hell of a lot longer than a 3-month commando training program. So why not teach more stuff?
Yeah. And there's the instructors that I wish to emulate and that have influenced me, and I think of the best instructors are the ones who, it's not this, really quiet, oh, maybe I should. It's constantly trying to evolve.
Yes.
And it's not just because I believe of integrity for like being fucking honest, but also people, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about I would call maybe snake oil salesman type shit, in the industry. And here's where it's no longer funny, is somebody's fucking life may depend on this. And this is where it's people like Nick Hughes, people like Craig Douglas, people like Cecil Birch, people like Paul Sharp, people like Larry Lindemann. I could go on and on and on. We take it seriously, and it can never be a resting on our laurels, and kind of talking about that, which is, we need to be literally the opposite of dogmatic doctrine. And what I'm hearing from you, if I can kind of make this into a line, is like, we need to be, one of the things I was thinking of is like, we need to be able to be reductionist in order to then kind of build back up into, okay, you've got an hour. Like I just trained an 18-year-old family friend. She's fucking, if she's 90 pounds. Also, I didn't even really know she doesn't really have any core strength. I was going to teach her an UPA, a hip escape when somebody's mounted. She couldn't do that. And I was like, so it was a very interesting set or series of not only, I guess you could call it problems, but issues to address, and also constraints, to use your word, about like from almost the military thing of, well, that's not going to work. So what are we going to do? And, this was in preparation for her to go off to college, and so that was an interesting challenge, and one that I hadn't actually been presented with to date. And so it was pretty cool, the stuff that came out. And one of the big ones was some of the MUC, the managing your own contacts, from Craig, also improvised weapon stuff from you, and from a couple other people. And then, but what she does have big time is a brain. I mean, she is sharper than fuck. So, well, it's like, as an instructor, how do I tap into that and kind of weaponize that, rather than seeing it as like, oh, well, she doesn't have like huge core strength. And you know what? I think she's going off to college, in my unbullshit assessment, way further ahead than she was, because
Yep.
also she understands limitations. And like, yeah, if you got someone for an hour, and she let's say we'll even flesh this out a little bit. So Nick Hughes has someone who's 90 pounds soaking weight, who doesn't have a lot of physical strength, is female, smaller in stature, maybe is terrified, and her boyfriend just called her and said, "I'm gonna find you, and I'm gonna fucking kill you."
Yep.
What do you, okay, and go. Now you got it. You got an hour and 15 minutes. Like, I don't know. Well, there you go. Nick, what do you teach her? And this is in person.
Yeah, and this is why I have that pyramid of training. I want to get back to one thing before we go down that road very quickly. A really good test for everybody before you spend your money, because there's a lot of people out there calling themselves instructors that, they've watched some YouTube clips and, hey, I'm going to make some money teaching this shit. Really good question. I got this from Greg Ellifritz, is what have you, and I think it was from Greg, he may have got it from somebody else. Ask the instructor, what have you changed your mind about in the last couple of years? And if they go nothing, run for the hills, right? Because really good instructors are constantly assessing, anything that they can find. They're reading. What did Kelly McCann say? You want to find something new, read an old book, right? Go and find these old tomes about training, read them, go to the latest and greatest, watch them. I've always maintained even a shitty seminar, I've still got something out of it. Yes. Go to these guys, take in what they're saying, evaluate it, put it through your own filters, and you should be changing your mind on a fairly regular, I would say, every couple of years. One of mine is the OC spray, right? And if you read the first iteration of my book, How to Be Your Own Bodyguard,
which I want to talk about. We'll talk about in much greater detail.
I denigrate it. And that was simply because when I learned it in the Legion, we learned it with tear gas, right? Which just makes your eyes water and it takes time to work. And we would try and use it on drunk Legionnaires and it didn't work. So I put in my book, the shit doesn't work, right? Well, OC is a whole different, I know you're an instructor with our friend Chuck, as am I. OC is a whole different animal, right? That stuff's not tear gas.
No.
And that shit does work. So if you read the latest iteration, the book's third edition now, if you read the latest iteration, right, I swear by OC, go get training in that shit, because that's so fast, right? You can teach someone that in literally a couple of hours.
Yeah.
All right. You've got them up to speed with a formidable weapon that's legal in all 50 states. All right. God, the shit's amazing. So yeah, always check with your instructors. What have you changed your mind about? And if they say nothing, right? Then
nothing, or I never had any reason to because it's so good, or that kind of shit.
I'd submit, go find another instructor, because the guys who are good are always changing their mind about stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry. So your question was, in an hour, mate, I maintain that triangle, right? I have this analogy I use when I teach my students. Years ago, we would all collect techniques. We were like stamp collectors or butterfly collectors, right? You went to a system or a school or a seminar to collect techniques. And we had all the judo techniques, all the karate techniques. I mean, the kung fu seminar and get the kung fu techniques. And we just went from instructor to instructor and style to learn their techniques. And then I was standing on nightclub doors watching guys, he's a third dan with that taekwondo school. And then some no-name street fighter had knocked the fucker out. And I'd going, well, he's got all these techniques. And I started to realize techniques on their own are not enough. And I started looking like what goes with that. Well, there's tactics, right? So the technique might be an elbow, but I need to be at 45 degrees and distracting the guy before I hit him with the elbow, right? So what are the tactics and what are the techniques? And then I would see people that were tournament fighters who did great, but you'd put them in a street situation and they'd shit themselves and run away, which is a mindset issue. So I started looking at mindset. Then I pick up Lofty Wiseman's book on survival, which is brilliant.
That's over there as well. I have all these books so far. I feel like I'm batting 1,000.
Yeah, he's amazing. I've been to his house. It's absolutely incredible. He's got 13 kids. He said that's how he learned about survival. He said, you have 13 children to learn about survival. His dining room table is the table from the killing house at Hereford. It's full of bullet holes where they've done the drills. And once it got to the point where it was going to collapse, he's like, I'll have that. And that's in his house. It's fucking great. Shit. Yeah, it's amazing. where was I? God, I knew this was going to happen.
Mindset and
yes, yeah. He
tactics.
had in his book, he has those three, which is great, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm validated. Lofty's saying the same thing, and they add the fourth element with the military, which is equipment, right? But in unarmed combat, we're assuming we, for whatever reason, don't have the equipment. And then I started looking at those three and like, well, do we give them equal weight? And I'm like, no, mindset, hands down, right, is the number one. So that's where I start the core of my training. All right, because I can teach you a technique, but if you don't have the mindset, and the analogy I always use is this one with the armed robbery in progress.
I actually still use this.
Yeah, it's great.
So, but you go ahead.
Because civilians get it, right? There's an armed robbery. Someone trips the silent alarm. The cops get the word to roll. The first cop turns up. He's a great technician. So in this example, he's a really good shot, right? And he jumps out of the police car. He's standing in the parking lot looking around, and he gets shot by the guy inside the Circle K. Okay, the next cop rolls up, also a good shot, right? He went through officer survival training school, so he has good tactics. And he pops up over the hood of the car ready to shoot the guy and finds he cannot pull the trigger. Now, people go, well, how likely is that? A lot more likely than you would think. And there is a SWAT team. I'm not going to name them, but they were on an operation. Mate of mine's in it. And they were on an operation that had started off serving a warrant, and the guy took pot shots at the guy serving the warrant. So SWAT was called. And they realized, the negotiator said, it's not going to work. Right. And so the guy gave the order for the sharpshooter to take the guy out, and nothing happened. And he called it again, and he called it again. And then finally they called the backup sniper, and they took the shot. And when they went back to the debrief, they said to the primary sniper, like, could you not see the target? No, I could see. Did your rifle not work? No, it works. Did you not hear me? No, I heard you. And well, what reason did you not take the shot? And this is what the guy said. And my mate was in the room. He said verbatim, Nick, he stood up and he looked at us and he said, you expect me to go to church this Sunday and tell my fellow parishioners that I played God and took a man's life? I'm not willing to do that. Right? Then begs the question, of course, hello, what's your fucking job description? It's like going to McDonald's and saying, I don't want to flip burgers, right? He wanted the badge, he wanted the extra money, and he wanted all the training, and he figured calculated risk, right? I'll probably never ever end up needing this. And on the day he was called out. So that lack of mindset, right? In this example, here's the cop popping up, can't pull the trigger. Third guy's got great mindset, great tactics, right? But his technique sucks. So he shoots himself in the foot, shoots his partner, shoots the lights off the police car, shoots the little old lady at the bus stop and the pigeons on the roof, but he can't hit the bad guy. All right? There's only one guy can possibly prevail in that situation, is someone has the mental wherewithal to pull the trigger, right? Who has the technical ability to hit what he's aiming at, and has the tactical nous to be behind something solid enough to stop incoming rounds while he's doing that, right? He wins. The other guy doesn't. And I had someone at a seminar once, since you and I have talked, that said, what about luck? Well, I'll take all the luck I can get, but I can't teach someone that, right? The only thing we can teach are the techniques, the tactics, and the mindset. So I would start anyone with the mindset. And then the things like, spotting the pre-attack indicators. Craig Douglas is really good at that shit. So is what's the Canadian Rich Dimitri? He's really good at that stuff too. Spot the pre-fight indicators, recognize the attack cues, and get the hell out of there, right? And then the fighting is the last resort.
Gotcha. Yeah, I still use that mindset, tactics, skill, equipment. An analogy, and I've had that to very good effect. And also the whole thing about luck is, like you said, I'll take all of it that I can, but you can't count.
No.
So it's one of those things. I mean, fuck, people get lucky all the time, but I figure also because I'm kind of a unicorn, that luck is going to be like, hey, buddy.
Yeah. Right when you need it.
Yeah, right when you need it. And yeah, I found that, for example, I was approached by an organization. They were going to send 6 people to me within the same office. And what they wanted a self-defense. Everybody has these ideas of what a self-defense class seminar thing is. And I was like, how long do we have? 3 hours. We're going to be doing pepper spray and verbalization skills. And you know what? Shit, it's like, you talking about. Also, I may fucking add that what you said kind of shows me everything about you and walking the walk and talking the talk, you know, in congruence is third edition of the book, right? It's developing and it's evolving, and it's absolutely critical. And that this is also one of the reasons that, well, first of all, I mean, for example, I love learning, and for the purpose of addressing the thing you said about, you know, you'll go to a shitty seminar.
Yep.
I've been to, luckily, mostly excellent classes, or at least good classes, but on occasion, mostly because I never saw it coming. You know, I'll be in a class and I'll be like, this is awful. This is really, really awful. But I learned something from it. You know,
at the very least, you learn not to waste time going to that guy's seminar ever again, right?
Yes, or yes, that, or it could be what not to teach, how not to teach, how not to structure it. I was in a class of a very well-known instructor doing a pistol class, and I was like, actually, Mark was in it. Did we even mention Mark during this, or was that?
Yeah, we did earlier on. I think so.
Okay, it was either that or it was before we started recording. But a very dear friend of mine, and we were both students in the class, and it was a 2-day class, pistol. I don't remember what the round count was, but it wasn't excessive. It wasn't like 1,000 or something. It was like, I don't know, 600 rounds, and they taught grip the morning of day 2.
Wow!
And I was like. And you know what? Also, but here's the thing. If it worked, because like we were going to at some point talk a little bit about Marcus Wynn, who I got a lot of really cutting edge, far out, but very, I mean, good is the word.
He's amazing.
High. It was, Jesus Christ. High dividend. There you go.
Yeah.
Curriculum from is like, if it was him and like, okay, he had me doing this really weird thing and then wound up really coming full circle. Well, the class that they taught the pistol class that they taught grip day 2, guess what? For the qual, I was one of 2 people that qualified. Right. And I'm not talking about by a sliver. One guy's target was a goddamn, you know, several buckshot rounds at 40 yards style kind of pattern. And I'm like, you know what? The proof is in the pudding. And you have, you know, what I consider, you've got administrative failures and then student failures. And, you know, given failure is a harsh thing, we talk about students. But if we look at both those, if I've got 6 people, right, and 5 people are killing the technique and 1 isn't, then that's probably a student related issue.
Yep.
But if I've got 6 students and only 1 can do it, then that's an administrator. That's a instructor failure.
Amen.
So
this is one of the lines I use all the time with testing my students. So we test them, right, in the Warriors Crav, and I will tell them, unlike most schools, that you're guaranteed to pass. You turn up, pay your money, you're going to get your thing. I tell them my goal is, like the Navy SEALs, I'm going to try and fail as many of you as I possibly can. Right? If I get 10 students testing and 10 students fail, that's the fault of the instructor. If I get 10 students testing and 1 of them fails, that's the fault of the student, right? He didn't prep.
Right.
And that's that simple. It really is. It's that simple.
Yeah. And then I guess like the other little thing about that, which doesn't change the outcome of like, look, 90% of you failed. You know, the one guy, you're not going to pass, come back. But I always wonder, and I'm sure that you do as well. It's like, how did I not? What was like? How did I fail a student? And that's where I fuck my brain up, honestly. But you know, was it like? And sometimes at 100%, you know, you didn't prep. Like, what do you expect? But it's like, I guess sometimes also it's more.
Well, I think the difference with what you're talking about is you're taking a bunch of guys in for a weekend class and you're trying to graduate them at the end of the weekend. Right. And if you're able to get 5 of them through, then you should have been able to get the 6. I'm talking when I'm training these guys, they're training with me for 3 to 6 months to get ready for that test.
Yeah.
All right, it's a little bit different.
That's an important distinction. Absolutely. So then strike what I said from the record. Fuck, I'll say it.
Mate,
So,
and on the martial arts side of things, by the way, I'm not going to say the guy's name because it would just elicit a shitstorm because they all think he's God. But I went to a seminar with a mate of mine. I dragged him down with this guy who is literally a god of martial arts. And it was the worst seminar I've ever been to from a martial arts perspective, which surprised me. The guy would demo a technique and then he'd stand there and, like, epitome of boredom, he'd just look off on the horizon while everyone practiced it. And then he'd go, okay, that's long enough. And then he'd demo another technique. And then he'd sit there and we didn't know what he was doing. They said the seminar is open to everybody. And it wasn't, because we were raw beginners and it was Filipino stuff. So we didn't know the basics of how to hold the stick or anything. And I had to call over his assistant. And I said, yeah, we're not getting this disarming drill. I don't even know this basic pattern they're doing. And the guy showed us a thank you. And then I called him the second time. The third time I called this guy, he rolled his eyes. Ooh. And it was the closest I've ever been to hitting someone that I didn't hit him, because I thought maybe it might be bad form in front of 140 martial artists to drop the head guy's, gopher. But I came that fucking close to hitting this guy, knocking him out and standing on his throat and going, what gives you the right when you advertise a seminar open to everyone and I'm asking as a student help and you roll your fucking eyes at me? And we left after lunchtime, but I got a lot out of that. When you watch me do my seminars now, I circulate the room every single, and you've been in them, you've seen it.
Oh yeah.
I demo the techniques, I get on with it, and I go around the room to every single group, and that's my timer of when I get ready to teach the next technique. I've gone through the whole group, asking them, have you got it, making little corrections, whatever you got, come back out the front and go, okay, good, let's move on, and then do the next one and do the same thing. Circle the room, make sure everyone's getting it. And here was this asshole just, here's a technique, and he just look out at the horizon while we all got on with it. And so, yeah, even shitty seminars, you can learn a lot.
Yeah. And then it's our job as instructors to go to all these things and then give our clients, students, etc., patrons, shortcut them so they don't have to.
Yes.
And people, and it's not the fault of the individual. If I say, holy shit, there's this guy in town and he's doing this cool seminar thing about, whatever, and I go and I don't know the difference, I think it's awesome stuff. And we need to fucking be able to be like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God, if we can say this as a public service announcement to make in the middle of this, I would like to tell any parent listening that takes your daughter to a self-defense instructor the week before she goes to college and say, I wanted to get a self-defense lesson, right? Because I get this every year, right around time when they're going, I just had this for the last month, right? I don't teach them anymore. Right? That exercise on what can you teach in an hour is literally an exercise to get creative thinking juices going. But I won't do that. And I tell the father, I go, let me ask you this. You've just been told at some point in the next 4 years, right, while she's at college, you're going to play Tiger Woods in golf. All right. And if Tiger wins, he's going to beat you to death with the golf club. Right? And your plan, right, having heard this, knowing this is the threat you face, is I know what I'll do. I'm going to go to the local golf club and I'm going to get a lesson, right, from the golf pro, a single lesson. And I'm never going to pick up the clubs ever again. I'm going to put them in the closet because, hey, I had a golf lesson. I'm ready, right? Because that's what these fathers are doing with it. And it's not their fault, right? I'm trying to educate them. Dude, when you know she's going to college when she's 16, bring her into the classes when she's damn 13 and get her trained up, because this is a perishable skill and it's going to take a while, right? Just like golf is, just like anything else is. You can't go and get, I'm going to play at Carnegie Hall, I better go get a piano lesson or a guitar, right? It doesn't fucking work. You have to train this shit. And I get so frustrated every year when the well-meaning parents who don't know any better, and I'm just like, God, I wish we could all spread that message. Right? Please don't try and bring your daughter to get a lesson before they go to class. And on my arsehole competition down the road, I have an Instagram clip of him teaching 4 girls that I refuse to teach for that reason. And what he's showing them, God, it nearly makes you want to cry. I mean, and they're all excited because they think, and I think you made this point before, they don't know any better. So
Right.
they think what they're being shown is actually going to work. And I'm looking at it going, not a chance in hell. That
Yeah.
girl's walking around with this false sense of security. Those 4 girls in this instance, walking around with a false sense of security that if any guy tries to get them, man, they're ready. And God, it's so bad. I'll send it to you at some point and show you. It's
Yeah.
horrific.
I'd like to see it because I'm a masochist and I hate myself. And that's like the equivalent of a person feeling like unsafe or the world is really messed up and they go and they buy a pistol and
Mm-hmm.
it stays in the box. And
Yes.
because they listen to the infomercial through
Yes.
the grapevine, and the ammunition's separate, and they have no idea, but they feel really good now. And it's like,
This is one of the things you had asked me in some of the questions we might ask was what are some of the what was the question
what are some of the yes.
misconceptions about self-protection, and one of the ones I wrote down was the guy who buys a gun and puts it in the drawer beside his bed, right? Right, I've seen the same thing with OC, right? I'll buy my daughter a can of OC, she sticks it on a keychain, and now magically, right,
Yeah.
there is this, I'm covered. I have this magic shield around me. No one will come and get me because I have the magic OC spray or the magic gun or the magic self-defense gadget.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's so infuriating.
Yeah.
You train with that? I mean, it's like buying a piano, right? And sticking it in the corner, and I am ready to play. If someone comes, right, I'll just jump right on that puppy. You might want to get some music lessons before we get. Oh no, I'm good. I got the piano.
Yeah.
Yeah, frustrating as hell. So
It's
frustrating.
Yeah, I would have people at where I used to work, and they would we would bring. I actually did 2 in services there about personal safety, and they'd say I have pepper spray, and I'd say okay, where do you
Mm-hmm.
keep it? And they'd say at the bottom of my backpack. I'd say okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is is it like in one of those little vinyl kind of faux vinyl leather things? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'd say, so it has one of them little like toggle switches, and they're like, I don't really know. And I'm like, when did you
Uh-huh.
get it? And of course, they're all like young nursing chicks,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm like, was it like, and I'm trying not to be a dick because I
Yeah.
already know the answers,
Yes.
but I'm like, was it like a gift from like your boyfriend? And yeah. And so when do you think he gave it to? Well, he gave it to me when I graduated nursing school. I was okay. When was that? It
8 years
was
ago.
3-4 years ago. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, we got to talk about, accessibility, but it's interesting because, and it's funny. And that's where we kind of can't pick up the slack is we can take the reins when we're training people. Okay, this person is a client. I'm going to fucking give them everything I got. And then, but it's at the same time, it's like, I wound up doing it because I happen to be working with these people and I'm like, well, shit, I gotta help them, but generally speaking, that's why I think it was, the late William April told me, so that 60% of guns in America have never been shot.
Yep.
Which I don't know if that's higher or lower or otherwise, but
Yeah.
So
well, mate, you talk about that one so funny because I just heard a story the other day about Yellowstone that they found a couple mauled by a grizzly bear, and they had bear spray in the bottom of their backpack. So when the rangers turned up, right there, it was in the bottom of the backpack.
Yeah.
So again, these idiots, right? No other word to call them, idiots. Will have the bear spray, and where is it? It's in the bottom of the backpack. So when the grizzly jumps out from behind the tree, hang on a minute, time out, and they're going to run. Just it's amazing. It's mind-boggling.
It's another equivalent of like, and I don't think it happens so much anymore. But there was a time kind of when they started mandating that cops would buy Kevlar, and a lot of times it'd be left in the trunk. And I had somebody actually in front of me, and I want to say it was a training class, but they were talking about life on the beat or whatever. I feel kind of cool saying that. But they were talking about their body armor and like why they weren't training with it. And they said, well, most of the time, I keep it in my trunk. And he's like, is that going to help you in your trunk? So the answer is no, right? He's fucking, if you're going to get shot, it's not going to be when you need to,
Going back to the changing your mind, by the way, not just OC. Here's another one I came up with, and I wanted to make sure you had this. I have been teaching for years, right? Students, how do you know when you go home and you're practicing? How do you know when you have a technique, right? When it's been learned? Because there's this fallacy, the 10,000 hour bullshit, right?
Right.
You didn't have to get kicked in the balls 10,000 hours to flinch when someone tries to kick you in the nuts.
I'm going to say that from now on.
Yeah,
So,
it's bullshit. And I think Glad will actually confess that the number is like arbitrary. We have determined it's 300 to 500 repetitions. And the way I tell students, right, I forget who came up with this, but it's genius, right? The UI, CI, CC, UC. UI stands for unconscious incompetence.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the analogy I use. A kid sitting in the back seat of a car that his parents are driving a stick shift, right? He is unaware. Unconscious doesn't mean knocked out. Unconscious means unaware of how the clutch and the brake were, and because he can't even see it, and you couldn't put him in the driver's seat, he couldn't drive the car, right? And that's the average person walking into one of our classes with regards to headbutting, right? They're unaware of headbutts. They don't know they exist, and they couldn't throw one if you told them to throw one. The next stage in that learning is now conscious incompetence. So the second you demo a headbutt, right, now they're aware of it. So that can happen in 2 seconds, unaware to aware, right? This is what a headbutt looks like, boom, right? But they still can't throw one. So now we have conscious incompetence. So they're back in the car. Now the kid's sitting in the front seat with dad driving. He's aware that something's going on down there with the pedals, but again, he can't duplicate it. Now he turns 16, dad takes him down to the back of the shopping center on a Sunday afternoon, and they kangaroo the car across the parking lot while dad teaches him how to get the clutch meshing with the thing, right? Millennial theft device, we call that now, by the way, the clutch.
Yeah,
they can't steal your car, yeah.
Nope.
So the kid's now down there destroying the gearbox, right? Kangarooing the car across the parking lot. He's reached conscious competence, okay? That means he is aware of it and he can drive it, but he has to think about it. And this is where dad can't talk. You can't have the radio on. There can be no distractions of traffic. The only way this is going to happen if he can totally 100% focus on this skill, okay? And then we hit unconscious competence, and that tends to be 300 to 500 repetitions, right? Building that neural pathway to where now the kid, 6 months later, we look at him, he's driving down the road, flipping off a guy next to him, drinking a Coke, talking to his mate and changing the radio station while he's shifting gears, all right? And we used to teach that as the 4 stages of learning, right? And it is. That's a great way to look at it, right? They're the 4 stages. And so I know when I have a technique down, when I can do it 300 to 500 times to the point where it's unconsciously come. I don't have to think about it. I just do it. Well, I discovered the other day reading a book on NLP, right, that there's a level beyond it. And that's mastery. Right? Because that kid driving down that highway, right, he's attained unconscious competence, right? He can drink the Coke, flip the guy off, change the radio, change the gears, and talk to his friend, right? All automatically. But he is not a Formula One racing driver or a rally driver, right? The guy who can, what's that guy's name? The Formula One champion, the little dude from England. Those guys, right? And the rally drivers, NASCAR drivers, they have attained mastery. So again, same thing, learn the guitar. You can play the guitar without looking at the sheet music. You are unconsciously competent. You're not a master. You're not Eric Clapton. You're not Jimi Hendrix, right? No one's going to pay to watch you play, right? So there's a level beyond is mastery. And I just learned that the other day. It blew my mind. I'm like, holy shit, because I thought that was the 4 levels of learning. No, there is one beyond that.
So unconscious competence to
mastery. Yeah.
Mastery. Interesting.
And I think that's where the 10,000 hours comes in. If you want to go from unconsciously competent to mastery, now you got to do the work.
So
now you have to do the
300 to 500, and then there, the 5th level mastery would be the 10,000. Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. I have some really old. Somebody sent them to me. The really old NLP books, which I want to have you introduce the whole NLP thing. Like that you got in the older programs, like you would do the seminars. I'll have to find them. I think probably right over there. And maybe get them to you or something, because
I'd love them. That'd be great. But you know, that's another thing, right? NLP, and we'll talk about it later. Hopefully, NLP's evolved. There were things that they were things they were teaching when it first came out that they've moved beyond now. They're like, either A, there's a better way to teach it, or B, they've realized that particular aspect doesn't work.
Well, let's tackle NLP right now, and you could bring it. Maybe we talk a little bit about
let's wait.
Yeah.
I want to get what before that comes under what I'm doing next. Let's get into this misconceptions of the martial arts and the big take. That was a great question. I never had it before. The takeaways from a life studying martial arts. Those were two really good ones.
Well, okay. Ready formally?
Yeah, formally.
What is the biggest takeaway that you've had for?
We're very formal. Let's do the biggest misconceptions in self-protection.
Biggest misconceptions? Oh, okay. Yeah. So what have you found are the biggest misconceptions in self-protection and training or martial arts?
Well, mate, we could probably talk about this for 6 hours. I was just going to go with some of the biggies that jumped out. Shooters that don't think they need any empty hand training.
Yeah.
Right? And conversely, martial artists who don't think they need any firearms training or weapons training, right? They're both as bad as each other. They're putting all their eggs in one basket. And if we look at warriors throughout history, right, they trained in every aspect of combat. There weren't samurai running around who said, well, I don't do the unarmed combat shit. I've just got my katana, right? And there weren't unarmed combat masters who like, well, I don't carry a sword. Fuck that. I'll just use my empty hand prowess, right?
I don't need that sword.
There was a story told to me by an Aikido master, a great guy. Can't remember his name. So wherever he is, forgive me. If you recognize the story, call me up and I'll give you credit. But it was a great story. I don't know how true it was. He claims that the unarmed combat instructor for one of the daimyo back in the period when we had the shogunate and all that stuff, put on a demo for, he trained the soldiers up and he put on a demo for the Lord. And they were doing unarmed combat against blades. And the Lord came down afterwards and the shogun came down later and was talking to him. And he said, that's a pretty impressive demo. And he said, how do you think it'd go on the battlefield? And the guy went, yeah, 4 out of 10. Right? Disarming the guy with the blade empty-handed. He said, yeah, probably 4 times out of 10 we could pull it off. So it doesn't mean we should not learn it because it doesn't work 100% of the time. Right? But it's not going to work 100% of the time. And I thought that was a really, really cool tale. But yeah, if you look at warriors throughout history, they train in every single aspect of combat. You can find these, if you ever go to the Tower of London, they have these woodblock prints of the English knights training in the forecourt of the castle. And they're doing figure 4 arm blocks against a dagger coming over the head. And they're doing X blocks against stabs to the stomach. So the English knights that, wielded maces and mallets and big broadswords and shit were still practicing unarmed combat. And yet here's these arrogant fuckers nowadays that, I've got a gun, I don't need that. Or I have unarmed combat, I don't need to shoot. And that's another caveat, by the way. If you ever hear anybody when you're talking to them who says the word just, right? Like if someone pulls a knife on me, just run away. I've got a gun, I'll just shoot them. Right? Anytime you hear the word just, you're talking to a clown. Like dismiss everything he's saying at that point, disengage from the conversation as fast as you can. The guy's a moron, right? There's no just anything when it comes to this stuff. So another misconception was the one I mentioned earlier that you said, right? That I can buy a gun and I don't need to do any training. Or I can go to a range. This is one of my favorites, right? I have a great affinity for rangers and I like that they run classes and they make shooting accessible, but they should all warn their people after you've been in one and you've learned the mechanics of how the weapon works, it's time for you to get outside, right? And go to one of the tactical shooting schools where they permit you to draw from under your clothing and out of vehicles and on foot while moving in and around people or obstacles, right? Because they're severely limited. So a lot of guys spend their lives at the range and go, I don't need that shit. I shoot every week, right? At a range that's well lit, shooting in one linear direction with no one shooting back and nobody's moving. And I'm like, that'd be like training to box, right? To fight Tyson in the ring, I'm going to stand in front of a heavy bag and I'm going to throw punches at it. I'm not going to do any footwork. I'm not going to move around and it's not going to punch me back. I'm just going to throw jabs, crosses, hooks, and uppercuts at this bag every Friday for years and years, right? And then try and convince myself that if I climb in a ring with a boxer, I'm going to be good to go because, hey, I've thrown jabs and crosses at a bag all day that's not punching me back. At some point, you have to get in the ring with a guy who's punching back, and shooting's the same. So yeah, another misconception, right? One of my favorite pet peeves. If someone pulls a knife, right, I'll do Nike Fu, and everyone giggles, right? Oh, what a cool name, Nike Fu. Yeah, I'm just going to run, right? And again, it comes from people who haven't thought it through or haven't been in the real world. Number one, I've never been paid to run, right? I was a bouncer at age 16. I can't go running through the club. Hey, boss, run with me. The guy's got a knife, right? He is paying me to go and deal with the guys with the sticks, the clubs, the batons, the guns, the knives, the chairs, whatever, right? That's what I'm paid for. Then I'm a bodyguard. Then I'm in the military, right? Security guard, bouncer, body, it doesn't matter what, police officers, right? They're paid to go and deal with that. They can't run, right? Second problem, who are you with? Running assumes, right, that I'm on my own and I'm a good runner. I can't run anymore. I got 4 herniated discs in my back and one hip's been replaced. The other one's due to go soon, right? I've got AFib. I can't run, right? Then there's another problem. Who are you with? So are you with your child? I look at people all the time. Dad's out with his daughter and his damn girlfriend, or they might be out with mom. The girlfriend's wearing 4-inch heels, right? So everyone's just run. Really? What, you leave your kids behind and just take off? The third problem with the running thing, run where? So I know a mate of mine, I'm not going to say the city because I have no idea if there's a statute of limitations and someone died. The guy tried to steal the cash register from the front of the nightclub, and my mate was the bouncer and chased him. The guy ended up vaulting over a fence that happened to be 80 feet to the electrified railway lines down below. And the guy hit the tracks and fried like a giant bug zapper, right? So you're a tourist in a foreign country and you get a guy pulls a knife on you, you run. Where are you running to, right? Are you running into a worse part of town? Are you running into an alleyway that's blind at the end? What are you doing? If you don't know where you, so is running, am I saying never run? No. If you're an avid runner, if you jog every single day and you're pretty good at it and you're wearing your track shoes and a guy pulls a knife and it's not an ambush and he gives you enough time and you're on your own and it's your neighborhood, by all means run. But that comes back to that just again. Just run. Like, oh, it's always going to work. And it's not.
Quick question about the running thing. I feel like in the past you may have said in one of the seminars or training things that it can, and it's not a never run kind of thing, but it can activate a predator prey drive thing.
Yes.
Is that lost now? It's not so much.
No, fuck no. There's 2 other things to mention. One, it's making the massive assumption that the guy running is faster than the guy with the knife. How the fuck do you know? And I've done this at a seminar. I took everyone outside and I said, who is the fastest runner in the group? Anyone want to guess? Right? And then I had them run 50 yards across the parking lot. And the guy they all thought was the fastest wasn't. Right? So how do you know again? What do you do? Ask the guy his times. Like, mate, what do you run 100 in? 15 seconds. Okay, I can do 14. I'm going to run. Right? It's bullshit. And if you look at the classic mugging situations, if you go and look at clips of people being stabbed, right, a lot of times the guy being stabbed is overweight and he's not a fighter. He's clueless. He's walked into a situation. Now he's being ambushed by somebody. And the kid doing it is this young, skinny, drug using freak, right? And who's running? It's bullshit. Right. But again, I see this crap all the time. And the final misconception. So, yeah, to your point, yes, it can running activates prey drive. That's why they tell you, right? What's the first thing you do when you see a bear coming in the woods, right? Has anyone ever said run? Right? Fuck no. It's make yourself look bigger and back away very, very slowly, right? And talk calmly, right? That's the only defense you have if you're not armed or have bear spray, right? Is to back away slowly, make yourself big and very, very slow. If you turn and run, good luck. You will activate the prey drive in any predatory animal. That's why they tell you don't run from dogs, don't run from wild animals, don't run, right? Walk away slowly. And yet here we have idiots who are supposed to be experts and just run, right? Bullshit. Another favorite of mine, because I've probably fought more multiple opponents than anybody I can think of, by virtue of the fact that I worked in that strip club where we had groups of guys to fight, right? I run into people all the time who try and tell you cannot fight multiple opponents and win. And I'm here to tell you that is complete bullshit, right? I've been charged multiple times for fighting multiple opponents. And I was acquitted in the subsequent trials, right? But my very first assault charge was against 3 people. I've had one against 9.
You told me.
Yeah.
I recall the one where the guy, where you got the assault charge because it was the last person and he was standing there, and it was like the broken bottle or something.
Yeah,
that was so funny.
People sit there all day long again because they can't conceptualize doing it because they haven't been trained in a system where you can do that, and they go, "You can't possibly do it. It only exists in movies." And I'm like, "Well, let's go back into history again. How many examples are there in history of smaller, well-trained forces beating numerically larger forces? Right? History is replete. Look at the 300, right, against the Persian army, standing army of 10,000 people, and these 300 guys put themselves in a geographically smart position and held off that army, right? Then there was the famous one, was it Hadrian or something, the 3 guys on the bridge holding off all the people. We can go to Andy McNabb's story, Bravo 20, 4-man patrol jump by an Iraqi regiment, leave 156 dead Iraqis in their wake while they make their escape, right? You can absolutely beat multiple opponents. And you know, a lot of this came out of the BJJ thing, right? What did they used to say as their cutesy saying, more than one, bring a gun, right? Well, yeah, if your art involves grabbing someone and rolling around on the floor with them, right? I had 4 friends die when I was bouncing. 3 of them were kicked to death on the floor. Right. Dennis Martin has a horrific story of a kid who was a medal contender for the Commonwealth Games in wrestling, who was bouncing on his own in the middle of the week, and a soccer team turned up in a minivan from out of town cheering on their team, and they ended up coming to a local pub where this guy was doing security. And after knocking him out, they put him on the ground unconscious, lined up 2 chairs on the dance floor as if they were goalposts, and they all lined up like they were taking a penalty kick at the World Cup. They'd run up and boot him in the head once each, and they'd all cheer, and then the guy'd run to the end of the line, and the next guy'd line up and run and do his kick. And that guy ended up a vegetable. He's in a wheelchair, just dribbles in a cup all fucking day. So yeah, this whole thing, people aren't in that sort of an environment. You can absolutely beat multiple opponents. But if you come from an art that involves grappling, no. I've had those guys die on the floor, right? I don't want to go on the ground. That mean, and again, before anyone jumps in there, it's because he doesn't know what he's doing. I wrote an article before the Gracies were ever heard of, right? You can go and get the magazine, Fighting Arts International. I wrote an article called A Rethink on Judo, directed at all the karate guys around the world, that you should go and do judo, because at some point you're going to end up on your ass on the floor and you'll need to know how to control someone and get them off you when you're down there, but not to stay down there, right? To learn how to move that weight off of you so you can get back to your feet. And I end up in that environment. And so, yeah, I've beaten lots of multiple opponents, and people run around telling you it can't be done. It's bullshit. There are ways to do it, right? If you think you're going to stand in the middle, surrounded like the Kung Fu film, and they come at you one at a time, no, that's crap. They attack en masse, right? And you have to have strategies to deal with that. A lot of flanking and a lot of constant moving and a lot of hitting people and throwing people in front of other people and so on. But yeah, it can be done. And it's another misconception that it can't.
And to your credit, the first time that I had trained in multiples was with Nick, with you. And it was just really well thought out, and like, I'm trying to think if, I think it was you too. So it was like multiples, and people would have I did it many times over the years, and some would have the tombstone, some would have
the windsuck drill.
Yeah, the windsuck, and they're hitting you over the head, and then you blow the whistle and they take you to the ground, and very realistic stuff. And then like, working to the outside, and I call it, I don't know if you did, or it's just what the lining up the ducks, so you only have one person, a line of people in front of you.
But it's small arms tactics from the military. It's flanking, right? You go back to the movie The Patriot, and you look at how they used to fight. You declare a battle was going to start in the morning at 9 o'clock on the field, right? And everyone would turn up, a la Braveheart again, right? This is how they fought. They didn't have night vision. So they literally camp across a field from one another, and they get up in the morning. You could see the other guys getting up and waking up. And someone would blow a trumpet around 9 o'clock and go, "We ready? Yes, let's go." And the bosses would ride out together and go, "Shall we get this thing started?" "Absolutely. Let's go in 5 minutes." And they'd ride back and they'd go out and fight, right? And then when the sun started to go down, you'd be like, someone blew a whistle like a football game, and you retreated to each side of the field, collected your wounded, and you went. You go look at the Patriot, where the British are lined up in rows, right? And they're all marching as they go down the field to a drummer holding the cadence, and the other side shooting, and they're shooting, and the front row kneels, and these guys shoot over the back, and the next row stands up. And finally, someone realized, right, so World War II, we evolved, right? Because even World War I was fought in trenches the same way, right, across no man's land. World War II, we evolved to where someone smart goes, hang on a minute, why don't we fucking flank them, right? And like run over here to the side. So now we're shooting down the trench and we're taking out a whole bunch of them at once, and they can't turn to shoot at us. And that's it. That's become an accepted doctrine in every military in the world. And that's all I was doing with multiple opponents. I realized if you try and stand in a spot and fight them, they just collapse around you in a circle and you get pummeled. Yeah. But if you move, right, if you flank, if you go off to one side and get behind the big guy and start drilling him, his mates can't get round him to get to you. And when they do, you shove him into one of them and then cut to the other side. So it's just a process. And figured it out the hard way, but it absolutely works.
And just a quick note that Nick had just mentioned judo and about fighting on the ground. Judo does have ground fighting as a portion of it. It's not just standing grappling. There is I think I actually really like that. I've never done judo specifically. I've done a bunch of different martial arts that have kind of made up for that, with standing grappling and throws and whatnot. But it's when you get to the ground in judo, you've got 30 seconds to finish. So I actually
sort of. So this is actually interesting how I came up with writing that article. The very first art, as I mentioned earlier, I ever learned was judo. When I go and stand on that nightclub door and I'm trying to do judo, right? I'm grabbing. I lived in a city that was hot all year round, and kind of like working in Miami, right? Everyone's wearing wife beaters and t-shirts. So when you go and grab the t-shirt on some guy and you go to do a hip throw or a shoulder throw, you end up throwing the t-shirt into the floor and the guy's still standing there looking at you like, you just wrecked my shirt. And I quickly looked at judo and went, yeah, this isn't going to work, right? So I went into the karate in a big way, knocking people out left, right, and center. I go into the Legion, I get out, I'm now working bodyguarding. And in the training I went through with Dennis and those guys, and I also work for a company called Showsec, run by Mickey Upton. And the one thing that is prevalent with celebrities is paparazzi. And if I'm seen throwing a roundhouse kick into the face of some guy, overzealous fan trying to grope Whitney Houston or something, right? And there's a big picture. There will be a picture, right? This was before cell phones, but it wasn't before paparazzi. Someone's going to get a picture of me doing that kick in that person's head. And it's not going to say Nick Hughes kicks fan. It's going to go Whitney Houston's bodyguard kicks fan in the head. And that costs her $500,000 in record sales, and you won't work again, right? And I'm now in England working for this celebrity company that I was doing in conjunction with. I was one of the few bodyguards that made the crossover between celebrity and diplomatic stuff. And I'm working with these guys, and this is all about crowd control again, because they're getting mobbed on the way to the bus from the dressing room, a big crowd of people pushing in, trying to get pictures and autographs. And everyone, God, 11 months of the year over there, they're wearing jackets. They've got denim jackets, leather jackets, big woolen coats. And I'm like, man, this is perfect. I need to go back to judo. I can foot sweep these guys. I can grab the jacket. Judo teaches you to keep your feet, which is really important when you're trying to get knocked off balance, right? And I went back to judo. Well, here's the problem. I've come out of the Legion. I was stationed in Djibouti, out in the desert, one of the hottest places in the world, Lake Assal. And it's on par with Death Valley in the States. So I'm so freaking skinny from running 15 miles every morning that if I turned sideways, they'd mark me absent. And I come back into this bodyguarding thing, right? 6'8" and rail thin. And I go to the judo, I join a local judo club, and you can fight every weekend. It's great. Judo's the real deal. You don't get a black belt without fighting. It's not like so many martial arts where you can hide, right? In judo, you can't hide. You, if you want to get your belt, have to go to a tournament on the weekend and beat 2 other judo players in your weight class. And I go into the heavyweights, and I'm 6'8" and rail thin, and these guys are 5'11", right, and 350 pounds. They look like commercial grade refrigerators walking out onto the mat. And I'm like, there's no way I can throw these guys, right? It's not going to happen. But if I can mess their throw up, right, and pull them down on the ground with me, I could beat them on the floor. And so I found there were 3 books at the time, 2 from Japan and 1 English one, on judo ground fighting, because all of the judo books are on the throwing aspect, right? So judo, for those that don't know, judo and wrestling are conversely opposites, right? Judo is 80% throwing, 20% floor, and wrestling is 80% floor, 20% throwing. And so I found the only 3 books that existed on ground fighting. And I said to my instructor, look, this is tactics, right? This is not techniques. This is tactics. I'm only going to win if I can get them on the ground. So let me focus on the ground. And he said, sounds like a plan. One other kid said to me, I want to train with you. And we started doing groundwork. So this was 1990, right, in England, before the Gracies. One guy came to me about 3 years later and said, have you ever heard of a group out of Brazil called the Gracies? And I said, no, what do they do? And he said, they're doing what you're doing. They focus on the ground. And I went, nah, I never heard of them. So that's when I wrote that article for the magazine, because I won all my fights on the floor. I didn't get beaten. I went all the way through to black belt, winning all the competitions. I put a triangle on a guy one day. This was so funny. I put a triangle. The referee tried to disqualify me because he said it was head scissors. And I said, I pulled out the judo book I had with it in from Japan, this big black fucking book with all Japanese writing. And I pulled out the picture and I showed him. And an old judo guy came over and said, what's going on? And I said, he's trying to disqualify me. I did this. And he, oh, no, that's the hell strangle. He said, that's great technique. And
what is it called? The Hell's Strangle?
Hell strangle.
Hell Strangle.
That's the Japanese translation. It was the hell strangle. Because when
pretty
you're
fucking accurate.
Yeah,
that's pretty accurate, actually.
Absolutely apropos.
I like that better than the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Triangle visual, the hell strangles.
Yeah,
like
hell strangle. Yeah, when you're in it, it's like going into hell, right? You've gone down into Hades.
Oh shit, that's
and I got the point. And I won, and so I was doing all this ground fighting, right, and tearing them up. So all I had to do was fuck their throw up, pull them on the floor with me, and choke them out, get them in arm locks, crossbody figure fours, all the shit. And that's when I was talking to Dennis, and he said you should write an article about that, and that's when I did it. I wrote the article, A Rethink on Judo, because I had rethought about it after dismissing it in Australia and going, no, for what I'm doing now, it's perfect, right? And then looking at tactically, the only way I'm going to pull it off is if I'm on the floor with these big guys. And that's how I won all my fights, choking them and arm locking them out on the deck with the judo ground techniques.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
The what do you say?
I said, yeah. Now we should.
I'm thinking on that. I'm marinating on that. Well, by the way, we have to get to How to Be Your Own Bodyguard and Future for Nick Hughes. So, but in the meantime, okay, we already did.
You want to do the biggest takeaways?
Yeah, let's do that, because we already talked a bit about the firearms thing. Is we
can do that again. We can do that again. You and I talked about that before we started recording this, I think. But let's the biggest takeaways, because that was a really great question that I've never been asked before, and I had to think about this.
If I can make Nick Hughes think, then
seriously,
I want a prize in my own mind for myself. So, and the question is, what is the biggest takeaway you've had from your studies in the martial arts?
There's 2. The first one is techniques don't let people down. People let techniques down and then claim the technique doesn't work. All right. So this is, and I'll say it again, techniques don't let people down. People let the technique down and then say the technique doesn't work. And I'll use an analogy I really love because it shows the difference in mindset between the Japanese or the Oriental mindset and the Occidental mindset. If you look at the Japanese bow and arrow, they're still shooting in Japan. They have Kyudo clubs, and they still shoot that big 6-foot bow from the bottom third of the bow where they lift it over their head and draw it down and they fire, and it still shoots perfectly flat. Our arrows arc. Theirs shoots flat trajectory because they always shoot in a covered hallway. So
I've seen Homeboy do that. Homeboy's done that in the movies when he goes, I can actually do it in my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But not in life, in reality. But
so if the Japanese doesn't hit the target, the Japanese mind blames himself, right? I didn't hit the target. I'm a fuck up. I better do more practice. The Western mindset is if I didn't hit that target, there must be something wrong with my bow and arrow, right? So look at our bows and arrows now. They're carbon fiber with pulleys. They've got weights on the string. They've got little sights. They have counterweights that hang down. They've got damn steel arrows that are built in a fucking machine so they're perfectly straight, right? They're always tweaking their equipment. Now, as a shooting instructor, I know you've run into this, right? The guy can't hit the target. Oh, his sights are off.
Oh, yeah.
Right? How many times you heard that one, right? Yeah, my sights are off, man. Yeah, I must have bumped it. When I did the first concealed carry class ever in the state of North Carolina, this was so cool. There's a loudmouth kid down there doing it with his buddy. They were sharing the gun. And this guy's going on the whole class, rabbling on about all this cool shit he'd done and what a great shooter he was. And then they went out. You had to qualify. You had to fire I think it was 20 yards, 10 yards, 7 and 3. You had to do 5 rounds at each as the practical portion. And this kid starts firing, can't hit shit. There's not a single round going into the target. And he starts yelling in the range, yeah, the side, I dropped it earlier. And he's turning around telling his mate, the instructor was this corn-fed motherfucker, bigger than I am, from the Gastonia SWAT team. And he walked over and snatched it out of the kid's hand, put a magazine in, and went, and he looked like Mel Gibson in that fucking Lethal Weapon, right? He put every single round. He's a Glock Sports Federation shooting champion. He's won every model gun they have. And this guy dry fires every day, shoots every day. I was talking to him about his regime. And he puts every single round, like his grouping had to be the size of a dime. And he went, nothing wrong with those sights, son, and shoved the gun back in the guy's hand. And the guy's blushing and like trying to hide in his damn shoes. He was so mortified. And yeah, it's the same thing, right? There's a technique doesn't work. And instead of saying, I didn't train it hard enough, we go, that technique doesn't work. It's the way the Western mind works. It wants to blame something else. It couldn't possibly be me, right? It must be something else. And I get frustrated with that in martial arts because, I see people teaching in karate that they're teaching these moves, right, which they say are blocks, and they're not blocks. If you get it, all you got to do is go get a Japanese fucking English dictionary and look at the word uke, right? It doesn't say block. It's not a block. They don't work as blocks. That's why you never see them in a tournament blocking anything, right? The mid-level, what we call block, is actually a standing guillotine, right? The overhead is the judo choke inside the jacket. The X block is jujigatame. That's the cross hand choke, right? All of those techniques are techniques other than blocking something. And people don't know that. And so when they learn it as a block and it doesn't work, they go, oh, that doesn't work. If it's still in martial arts, it stood the test of time, right? Because all of that stuff came from the battlefield. The winners came home passing on their knowledge. The losers didn't. And that's a big difference to nowadays, right? There's no life and death involved. When I came out of bouncing at night, I would go into the karate school the next day teaching my students, this works, right? How do you know? Because I knocked out 3 guys with it last night. I found out my karate instructor, I only learned this a little while ago watching an interview with him. When he originally trained, he had a security company of 100 guys called the Troubleshooters, and about 90% of them were Maoris, right, coming over from New Zealand working on the door. That was a classic for the Maoris. They'd leave New Zealand because there's no money there. They'd come and get bouncing jobs in Australia, and they'd be making as much as the damn Prime Minister of New Zealand working on a door. So they were in his company in Melbourne, right? 90% of them Maoris in the security company, and they're learning Goju. And so they would learn a move, it might be an elbow. So then Bob would turn around and go, tonight, when you go to work, we're all going to just do elbows. And so these guys would disperse to all the nightclubs across Melbourne. And all night long, they'd throw elbows at people, right? And then the next night, they'd go back and they'd discuss it. And then they'd pull another technique out of a form, and it might be headbutting someone, right? They go, tonight when you go to work, we're going to headbutt. And so all across Melbourne and all these nightclubs, all these bouncers are like smashing headbutts into people and dropping them. And the next night it'd be foot sweeps. They would literally take a technique a night out of a form and go use that tonight at work. And talk about, lab rats and feedback, right? It's not theory at that point. These guys learn it, go to work, apply it, come back, pass on the lessons. And that was the system. It was fucking terrific. The other big takeaway. So in other words, the analogy I use with my students, if someone teaches you to pick up a hammer, right, and hit the nail in with the bottom of the handle right? Because they don't know any better. That's the way they were shown. So they're passing this on, right? They pick the hammer up. They don't know what it is. No one's ever taught them. And they go, well, you must hit with this, right? That's how we've been taught a lot of martial art techniques. And then when we try and use the hammer that way and it doesn't work, we go, hammers don't fucking work, and we throw it away, right? The hammer works as long as you're taught the proper way to use the hammer. And that's a lot of techniques in martial arts that have gone because of sport applications. We don't know anymore because very few Americans actually go out and street fight.
Right? And one of the most interesting things, and I've been doing traditional martial arts my entire life since I'm 8 years old. And Nick, your breakdown of like you just started to do there, which is we could do like a fucking 12 hours on, is like the kind of the hidden things inside traditional martial arts about how this isn't an actual block. This is it's standing guillotine. It's really interesting. But go on.
Yeah. So the other big takeaway. Yes, this is huge. This is another one I only learned probably 2 years ago. Martial arts and self-defense are not the same fucking thing. You look at all the martial artists right around the world. Every taekwondo school has a big thing in the phone book ad or the website or on the front window, right? Or on their bus driving around. Korean art of self-defense. Not fucking self-defense. Brazilian jiu-jitsu advertises itself as self-defense. Every single fucking martial arts school I go past advertises itself as self-defense. They're not, right? And when I get students in here going through an intro class, this is how I explain it. I want you to imagine two pies, right? Like the size of a pizza, and cut the slices up. And now look at the self-defense pie, right? One slice of the self-defense pie is how to physically fight, right? Empty hands. Another slice of the self-defense pie is, right, how to shoot or tear gas, whatever weapons. Another slice of that pie is situational awareness. Another slice is knowing the law so you don't end up in prison. Yet another slice, right, is home security. Another slice is vehicle security. Another slice is recognizing pre-fight attacks. Another slice is mindset. Right? Another slice is situational awareness. Another slice is verbal de-escalation, right? We have all of these slices. Now you go to martial arts pie, right? You have a slice that's devoted to boxing, fisticuffs. You have a slice like Taekwondo that's devoted to kicking. You have a slice of Filipino martial arts that's devoted to sticks and knives. You have a slice of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is devoted to on the ground. You have a slice of karate, which is 50-50 punching and kicking. You have a slice of, bando, kung fu, take your pick of any martial art. All of the martial arts pies teach you fighting, a particular skill or a particular aspect of fighting. That's got fuck all to do with self-defense, because we know from that, and that the acronym I use in my book, right, SIVA, all crime, when I'm doing the bodyguarding training, right, we're doing all the preventative shit. I'm going, when are we going to get to the bit where we shoot people and punch them up and everything? And they're like, no. That's the last thing you ever do as a bodyguard, right? The first thing we do is we do a threat analysis. What threat is facing the client, right? How is he going to be chosen? Then they're going to try and isolate you, right? There's a verbal component. When the guy comes up, hey, can I get the time? You got to match. Where do I find this? And when you're distracted, they attack. It's the fourth step in that process, right? What we call SIVA. It's the fourth step where the fight starts. And this is where all the martial arts start. You go into a martial arts school, and the first thing they start teaching you, okay, the guy's going to choke you. And this, the horrible crab fucking front strangle defense is the first thing they teach. And in the 3,000 plus fights I was in bouncing, I've never seen anyone get strangled. But yeah, they go in and they start teaching this way. We're going to go, the guy's coming at you with a knife over the head, or he's going to throw a punch, or he's going to tackle you and take you to the floor. And this is what we do, right? That's fighting. It is only one slice of the self-defense pie. And that was my biggest takeaway for a long time, because I interchangeably use those names my whole life. I'm telling people, you want to learn self-defense, you should come to my karate school, right? Come to my karate school. I'll teach you self-defense. They're not the fucking same. They're not even close. Actually, I lie. They are close, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Did I just render you speechless, Jeff Blutman?
No, I think I'm speechless when I'm sleeping, although I just figured out like in the past fucking 3 weeks that I'm sleep apneic, which makes a lot of sense because I wake up exhausted.
Yes.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yep.
No, and this is something that I actually go back and forth with, not specifically that, because I do 100% agree with you on that, is I have a tendency, I'll be like, is what I'm doing self-defense or self-protection? And then I'm like, is it even, is self the word that I want to have there, because that just means myself. So I kind of go like, I don't know what the answer, I don't have the perfect phrase. And I usually default to self-protection.
Semantics are important.
They are.
Yeah, I did a speech last year for a group of about 600 people for the American Public Works Association on how to deal with active shooters, because the current advice of run, hide, fight is truly lamentable. It's the worst shit I've ever heard in my life. We'll have to do a program on that one day, maybe.
Let's set it up.
Anyway, I talked to them and I said, it's very important you are very careful with what we say, because, and this is the analogy I use when I have a group, I asked everyone in the room who's got daughters. Right. And probably, 40% of the room put their hands up. And my next question is, do you want them to have sex education or do you want them to have sex training? Right. Because a lot of people interchangeably, right, use those two terms like they're the same thing. Right. I'll go get educated. I'll go get trained. Right. They're different.
Yeah.
Sex education at school is a hell of a lot different than what would be sex training. Right. So, yeah, semantics are very key. So I'm right there with you on self-protection versus self-defense versus martial arts. We've got to be careful because so many people think they're one and the same, and they're not.
Yeah. And that's like kind of one of those things that keeps me up at night, going back to sleep.
Well, I mean, self-protection. I use protection as the broader term. Because
yes.
If we say self-defense, if you polled 360 people in America, what does self-defense mean to you? They're going to go kung fu.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
When you go, I used in the first iteration of the book, I used the term self-protection to encompass the broader spectrum of home security, vehicle security, situational awareness, verbal de-escalate, all the things we covered. So I call that self-protection. And I think going to your point of, well, is it self? Is it only me? No, because myself is concerned with protecting my family and friends.
Yeah.
So I think, and as a bodyguard, myself, I am concerned with protecting my clients. So I think it's okay to call it self-protection and still encompass the broader thing of protecting myself and my family and my loved ones and my friends and whoever I'm hired to protect.
And that's where I'm at. I just always feel like there's some better thing to call it. But then if you stray too far away, nobody knows.
Yeah, no one knows what you're doing. Yeah.
And then if it's self-defense, I always think of like, well, I mean, literally, it's like I have an image of a black and white, poster of a self-defense seminar with a chick back on her heel about to do something and a dude going like that. That's literally what comes up. So it is. And I think that's important, though, to think about like, what is the first, any kind of business thing, if it's a name or
it's huge.
What is the first thing that you think about? And then ask your friends, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yes. Massive.
So so we got 27 minutes left.
Yep.
Firearms training. I feel like we could do a whole thing on firearms and firearms training, because even just before we went live, we were talking about revolvers and about potential niche roles. Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? I feel like we should do a whole show on guns.
We can, but I would defer to people like,
what do you got?
I would defer in that field, right, to people like Rogers, Claude Werner, Tom Givens, South Narc, right? Because that's their forte.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good at the unarmed combat stuff. They understand that, but they will tell you their forte is the shooting and producing good shooters, right? My forte, I'm okay at shooting, right? I've gone through all the bodyguard thing. I won on Dennis Martin's course, right? They had a shoot off at the end. I won that. When I went to South Narc's course, we had a shoot off in the morning. He does the live rounds before lunch and the simunitions after lunch. So the last thing before we went to lunch, we had a shoot off, right? That's the one where you're running on the spot and he's hurling abuse and they're throwing empty soda cans at the back of your head. And then the beeper goes and you've got to draw and put 2 rounds into the target. I won that, much to the chagrin. Fuck you, buddy. Much to the chagrin of one of the guys from the NASA SWAT team out of Cape Canaveral. who was the current champion at the time. There's a tip I learned from Shakespeare, by the way: always go last, because it gives you something to beat, right? If you're the first guy, you pull the weapon and shoot. You're not forcing yourself to go fast because you really don't know what's expected. And then Craig's doing the shot timer, and he's marking up the first shot and the second shot, and he puts the times up. And this guy went from NASA, and his crew was there. Was about 6 of them there, and they're all patting him on the back because he's obviously the guy. And I forget what he was. I think he was like 1.4 seconds, if my memory is correct. And I beat him at 1.12, I think it was, drawing from concealment and putting 2 rounds into the target. And he was pissed, right? So I'm okay. I can shoot. I've been shot at. I've shot at. I can run those things. But my preference has always been for, and I think I'm better at, teaching the unarmed combat stuff. And I defer to people like Craig and, Ella Fritz. Claude Werner's amazing. I went through Rogers shooting school. Amazing. I tell all my guys, you want to go and shoot with those guys, right? And I'm pretty sure Claude Werner, if someone went to Claude and said, hey, I need to do some unarmed combat, he'd probably say, go find Nick Hughes.
And I think that ultimately we answered the question. It was where does firearms training fit in the ultimate scheme of things? And we kind of covered that anyway, that it is one of the slices of the pie.
Absolutely.
So, and honestly, I think that that's the correct fucking answer. Like, that happens to be my specialty, because that's, well, anyway. But
I teach my students who don't like guns, right, how to run one. And when I explain why, they do it, right? Because you're concerned with self-defense and someone pulls a gun off you. This is one of the things that I get so pissed off when I see martial arts being taught. And we'll touch on that as to what I'm doing next, which we need to get to because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
I get so frustrated when I watch gun disarming videos, and I'm about to do a YouTube thing on this. I get so frustrated because they have some dits standing there, usually with their hands up, which no one does. And the gun comes out, and the guy takes the gun away, and everyone goes, ooh, and they stop right there. I'm like, what the fuck do you think's going to happen next? Right? Go look at videos. Just Google, right? Clerk wrestles gun from robber. There's millions of them all around the world. So for all these idiots, again, I hear all these so-called experts on, you can't take a gun, I'll shoot you, blah, blah, blah. Just go Google, right? Untrained clerks take fucking guns off robbers all the time. So to sit there and say it can't be done is bullshit. They do it all day and they have no training, right? They'd take it away faster if they did, but they get into these struggles over the weapon. A lot of times they pull the gun away. Right? What happens next? One of 3 things. The robber runs away. The robber complies and gets on the ground. The robber goes over the counter and tries to get the gun back. None of the guys doing gun disarming are practicing any of that. Right? Then what happens? Now you're holding the guy at gunpoint and the cops turn up. That's a whole nother. Right? You better have that dialed in. How many people have been shot? Like the Asian dude in Colorado recently. The lunatic went down, called the police station from outside the police station in Colorado. I think it was Denver. And he said, I'm going to kill cops. Right. And he gets out of the car and starts shooting at a cop who was parked outside writing his reports. And the cops all hear that inside the station and go, holy shit, start screaming out for backup. There's this Asian dude outside with a concealed carry permit, drops the shooter, runs over and picks up his weapon, right, to pull it away from him as the cops run out and see this guy and they light him up and kill him. Right. So there's a whole training module just on that. So we do 4 things, right? We take the gun away, right? Then we learn what to do next. So even my non-shooting people have to learn how to run that gun, because when you take it away from the guy, he's going to know in a heartbeat if you don't know what you're fucking doing. And you're going to end up shooting yourself or somebody innocent, right? You need to be on top of that.
Yeah. And I think also, this can be like an overwhelming thing to think about that whole pizza when you when you open up the pizza box. However, what I can tell you is that when you get with reputable trainers, the Nick Hughes, I put myself into this category of like people that are what you want an instructor to be is know their abilities, the limitations, their growth areas, be able to say, I don't know the answer to something. That's a huge fucking one. But also, I want people to be thoughtful if you've got an instructor and you kind of know, are they really being thoughtful? And that's where you get the I'll just.
Yeah.
That's a guy who's not being thoughtful. If you want to go to them for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because that's what they teach, then do that. But if they're marketing themselves or you're signing up for learning, the combative pieces of the pie and self-protection pieces of the pie, then that's something that we really have to be, attuned to.
Mm-hmm. Well, it comes back to what we talked about before about the UC, CICC, UC, right? The unconscious competence. I am at the level where I could teach shooting at unconscious competence. I'm not at mastery, right? You go to guys like Claude Werner for that. You go to guys like Bill Rogers for that. Claude, the story, right? Came out of hospital with his fucking pacemaker and decides to compete 24 hours later in the IPCC championship and wins it with a revolver. Back when nobody was shooting revolvers, they all had these high-speed, low-drag, blue-ported, whatever, light triggers, and he wins, coming out with a freaking pacemaker in. So that's mastery.
I actually have to approach Claude about doing a show because I'm sure that'd be a awesome thing.
Do it soon, mate, because he's on the final glide path. I sent 2 of my students to him to train, and he told them, he said, yeah, listen, if I collapse while I'm teaching this, he said, take your time walking up to the clubhouse to let them know, because he said the last time they revived me.
Yeah, we know. And it's a thing of we know of each other. We've kind of hovered around the same groups. But I've never trained with him, and I really want to. Go. Well, I mean, that's one thing, but also get him on the show ASAP. So
yes.
So final question for this show.
Yes.
Because we'll be doing another. This has been too awesome for me and fun as well. Is what does the future hold for Nick Hughes? And I also want to make sure that we do an outro too, with more information about where we can find you and stuff.
Mate, this is you're the first person that's hearing this, apart from a couple of very close friends. I am going to be getting out of martial arts. I nearly did that years ago. I was so frustrated with the Taekwondo classes. You've seen them, right? The daycare centers, the McDojos. I was so frustrated with what was going on, and it's worse in this country than anywhere else. And I was going to quit. And Gavin Mulholland, who's an amazing karate guy from England, he's written probably the best book on karate ever written, called 4 Shades of Black. And he was over visiting, and he said, if you quit, he said, and people like you quit, who's left? Just the charlatans. And martial arts is gone. He said, you have to stay. You owe it to the martial arts to stay and keep teaching the real deal shit. And so I did. All right. But I get to the point now where, age catches us all. I've got, no cartilage in my left shoulder whatsoever. I've got 4 herniated discs. I have AFib with bradycardia and tachycardia. Knees are shot. Everything's falling apart, as it does. And I think it's time to be more cerebral, right? There is enough people out there now teaching martial arts. With MMA has become this proliferation of martial arts around the world. It's not the find the school behind the laundromat underneath the 2nd floor of the old building in the basement at the back of the 3rd Street, that sort of crap. We had to hunt the schools out. It's now become everywhere. Social media has made it ubiquitous. I mean, there's Instagram experts everywhere teaching bullshit. And I've just got to the point, I don't want to be the 80-year-old grandmaster that they wheel out in the chair and you should have seen him when he was 20, right? It's time to use my brain. And I have been, I'm not going to say a side hustle, I've been coaching people. The entire time I've done martial arts, I have girls come in that are victims of abusive relationships, rape, trauma. I've had boys come in that have been bullied. They lack self-confidence. And I talked before about mindset, right? That was my forte. I've been using shit I learned from Marcus Wynn, NLP, Dennis Martin, NLP. They set me down that path. I did hypnosis back in 2003 with a friend of mine, AJ Poyden, in Florida. I've read every single book on, positive thinking, mindset training. I've got a book coming out on mindset for martial artists because I think that's the most important aspect. Yeah. And I've been working with these people, and I get so frustrated because originally I used to send them to traditional therapy. And I now have a saying. I have a problem, Bandler, one of the creators of NLP, was down on psychotherapy. He used to call it psycho the rapery, right? Because he could cure phobias in 5 minutes, which they did many times, right? And psychiatrists would have, and I'm not dogging traditional psychiatry, it has a place, but they would have someone who was afraid of spiders on their couch for years, all right? And I've got a saying about the past, right? It doesn't get any better. You can go and sit down on a couch and talk about it all fucking day long. It doesn't make it any better. You have to make change, right? If that shit's affected you. And the only way to make that change is going to be in your future. And so that's what coaching does. So we say psychiatrists take someone dysfunctional and make them functional. I take someone functional and make them fucking extraordinary, right? And I got faster results doing my own shit, especially when I tuned into NLP and hypnosis. I was getting people turned around and training 100% switch around in just, 1 or 2 sessions, as opposed to sending them off down to this lie down and talk to the shrink for hours every day for months and months, in some cases years, before I'd see them again and go, okay, now I'm ready. So I'm good at that stuff. And in the last year, I have been gearing up, especially since COVID. COVID impacted all martial artists and all gyms in a massive way. We never really recovered. People have gotten to the habit now of working out at home. And so I'm looking at, I want to go into this mindset direction. I want to fix people, because one of the things I've realized doing this training is you cannot change behavior. This is really key. If we don't get one other takeaway from this session we've done today, get this one. We don't change behavior until we've changed belief. This is why diets fail. This is why all of, the guy wakes up on the 1st of January, I'm going to lose weight, right? And he goes running and he fixes his diet up. And what happens within 14 days, right? The diet's gone. He's back eating the shit. He's going to quit alcohol. What happens within 2 weeks? He's going to give up smoking. He makes it 3 days, right? And they revert. Why are they reverting, right? Because they have a belief. And I'll just give you a really quick example.
Yeah.
Diets, for example, and where limiting beliefs come from. And we all have limiting beliefs. If you've ever said, I could never date that person, I could never open my own business, I could never be a millionaire, they're all limiting beliefs, right? Where do they come from? We have an imprint phase when we're children. In hypnosis, we call it critical faculty. It doesn't formulate in a human until they're 7, which is why we can tell kids Santa Claus, Easter bunnies, and tooth fairies exist. If I tell a 3-year-old there's a purple dragon in the driveway giving out candy, he's going to run out there expecting to find the purple dragon. I tell a 12-year-old that, he looks at me and goes, yeah, fuck you. What have you been smoking? Right? So that critical faculty is the imprint period. And our parents, right, none of them did a PhD on parenting. None of them did a bachelor's. None of them went to school for it. None of them did a weekend seminar. Most of them didn't read a fucking book. They just parent you the way they were parented. And so the parent tells the child things like, you better eat everything on your plate. There is a child starving in Africa, right? Now, we go out now, portion control in America is out of control, right? You go to Europe and you get the little piece of food on your plate and there's no one's fat in Europe, right? You come here, every fucker's fat. The portion is humongous and we eat it all. And you're not hungry. Halfway through that meal, right? You're no longer hungry. You're satiated. But you have that subconscious message. There's a kid in Africa starving. I better clean everything on this plate. So we overeat. Now you come along and go, okay, now I'm overweight. I better diet. Well, you still got that belief imprinted on your subconscious, right? That you need to keep eating everything because of this starving child. And that's why the diet doesn't work. So we have the subconscious part of the mind and we have the conscious. And when those two get in conflict, subconscious always wins. So you try the diet and then you blame your willpower, right? You stick to the diet and it's fighting. And the subconscious goes, come in the air, fuck you, boom. And you go back. Until we change that underlying belief, you will never change the behavior long term. And that's what I'm doing with the coaching. We're going in and we change the underlying negative belief. I have another thing for overeating, right? You go to grandma's house, you hurt yourself. What does granny do? Oh, so honey, sit down. Here's some cookies and an ice cream. Now, a girl gets dumped later on by her boyfriend and she's upset. What does she do? I know, I'll go get cookies and ice cream and sit here and eat the whole bucket because I feel good when I do that. It reminds me of grandma, right? That was put into her head during the imprint phase. So now when I get hurt, I eat buckets of ice cream and it makes me feel better, right? And of course, then I'm overweight. So now I feel shitty. So what am I going to do to feel better? Eat more ice cream, right? And now you're stuck in this loop. Until we change the belief, you can't change the behavior. So that's what I'm doing with my coaching.
So where does someone get more information about that? Do you have a website specifically designed yet and up and running, or is this something that you're going to
the website will be out probably by the time this goes to air. I'm not sure when you're planning that. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, the website will go live. It's coming in conjunction with my newest book, which is on goal achievement. If you've ever heard of SMART goals, it's the dumbest shit in the world. I actually scientifically researched goal setting. I researched goal achievement. SMART doesn't factor into it anyway. Harvard Business School called it banal, and yet corporate America, that's all they teach for goal achievement, which is why most people don't achieve their goals, right? 93% of people have given up their New Year's resolutions by the third week of January every single year because they use that SMART goal crap. All right, so I went and did scientific research with Dr. Carlin and Kaplan, a whole bunch of people, University of Indiana, research what works, put it into a cool acronym so it's easy to remember. That book is coming out, and that's going to be launched in conjunction with the coaching website, and that is the direction. Over the next year, I will wean off the martial arts, get my students all up to where they need to be before I close the doors, and I'll be doing full-on coaching, which is a hybrid methodology of mine, combining hypnosis, LEFCO method, which is eradication of limiting beliefs, some stuff for PTSD and hypnosis, NLP, a whole bunch of stuff. And the ICF, International Coaching Federation methodology, which is very cool. And I'm using, so it's the same approach as my martial arts, right? I don't think one art has all the answers. I don't think hypnosis has all the answers. I don't think NLP has all the answers. So I've spent the last 10 years studying all of them, and I will take the best elements out of each and put it into my own hybrid coaching methodology. So I'll be working with people with chronic pain, controlling weight, quitting smoking, fear of flying, phobia, positive, fear of public speaking, all that stuff. I'll be able to work with them on all that.
I kind of have some ideas about, utilizing Arm Dynamics channel that I'll ask you when we're kind of wrapped. But I have what could be some pretty cool ideas. Well, I think they're fucking cool, and we'll see. So I'm gonna move to take us out.
Yes.
I got to tell you, my friend, first of all, if anyone thinks that this is the only interview that we're doing, they can shut their brain the fuck out, because we're going to be doing another one. This was absolutely outstanding, and I'm so grateful. Like, again, 2005.
Yeah.
That's so this was a long time coming, and I really am so grateful to you for coming on the show. You can get more information about Nick Hughes. I'm sure that you enjoyed this episode, and I couldn't hope for a better first guest. You can go to kravmaga.com. And you're based out of North Carolina.
North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte. Make sure it's Warriors, plural, Krav Maga, because there is a Warrior Krav Maga down in Florida. We're not affiliated.
This is warriorsKravMaga.com, and you can get Nick's book on. Now, is it in? Did you do a printed thing, or is it? It's Kindle?
It's on Amazon as print on demand, and it's a Kindle, and it is. Kindle. It's actually an audio book currently on a very obscure platform called Findaway Voices.
Really? And you're narrating it?
I narrate it. They put it out to everybody that Audible does not put out to. So a lot of smaller countries around the world don't have access to Audible. Findaway Voices, I recorded for both. Audible, unfortunately, has these horrific hoops you have to jump through to get your book on them, and I still haven't jumped through them all. But you can find audio versions of it.
What I am going to do is any and all links that you would like to provide, how to get your information about Krav Maga and combatives, and how to be your own bodyguard, which, by the way, is a book. I can never say something's mandatory with a client, you know what I mean? Because I have the strong, I strongly encourage you to read this, and then we talk about it. But how to be your own bodyguard is one of them. And also, even I got through it, And I say got through it because reading is like the most difficult modality for me with racy brain and ADHD and all that other shit. It's absolutely excellent. It should be required reading for anybody on this path to be called to become what I call a practitioner. And we'll get all the links out. Any last words? We got 3 minutes.
No, Matt, I just want to say I'm honored that you picked me to be a guest on the show, and I'm glad to see you back in this format in Arm Dynamics, because, you went quiet for a long time. I knew you'd gone off into nursing, and I'm so glad to hear you back because I think you made for this, and really glad to be your first guest. I'm honored.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Nick. And for more information on Nick, you just go to the below description box. Go ahead and I feel like everybody says this, so I'm just going to say, go ahead and if you like this video, click like. And if you want to subscribe to our channel, subscribe. And other than that, I will see you on the next episode of Armed Dynamics. How do I stop this? and yeah.